Hi sewing friends! In today's video I'm going to show you how to put a decorative strap end on a webbing strap. This is an adjustable strap and I put a fun pop of color on the end there instead of having a raw edge that will slowly fray over time. I make a lot of bags. I am a bag teacher most of the time. I teach all kinds of sewing, but bags are the most popular in my area. So over time, I have perfected a great way to put a decorative edge on the webbing with my fabric from my project that seals up the edges, gives it that pop of color, and is really a lot more straightforward and a lot less fussy than other methods of doing it. The one thing is that you do have to go a little slow. Can be a little tricky to get a hang of the folding method at the start, but after you do it a couple times, it's super easy. I just recommend watching the video at least all the way through before you try it. Watch it again, slow it down if you need to, and then I also include a written version down on my website, so that is linked down below. Written version, all words with pictures, so if video format is not your thing, you can just check out my website and the written tutorial is there ready for you. So, before we get started, you need to gather your supplies. You need to get webbing and a bunch of hardware and stuff. So, first things first, you need to figure out what size webbing you're doing. I used 1-inch wide webbing, just like this. I prefer 1-inch webbing, but that's just because that's my preference of the look of it. Does not matter if you use 1-inch webbing, 2-inch webbing, 1.5-inch webbing. Does not matter. The only thing that matters is whatever size webbing you get, you have to match it with your hardware. So if you're using 1-inch webbing, you have to use 1-inch hardware. You need it to be the same size as your webbing. The 1-inch will not fit the 1.5-inch. 1/2-inch hardware will not fit 1-inch or 1.5-inch. Similarly, if you get hardware that's too big, like you get the 1.5-inch hardware, it will be too big for that webbing strap. So you don't want to put it on and have it moving around a bunch. It will just get out of place and warp over time. So whatever size webbing you get, you have to match it with the hardware. Hardware-wise, you are going to need one adjustable strap slider, which has a bar in the center. It can be a movable bar or a stationary bar. Again, preference. I like the ones with the bar that moves. That's just what I prefer because it moves a little easier. That adjustable strap slider is what goes here to make it where your strap is adjustable. So you need one of those, and then you need at least one swivel clip. If you are making this a fully removable strap, you will need 2 swivel clips. My strap is going into a sandhill sling, so this end will actually be tucked into a pattern piece of the bag. So I don't need to put an additional swivel clip on it. I only need one. That's all preference. When we get to the end of the video, I will show you how you would go ahead and put a secondary swivel clip on. That is just repeating the process kind of thing. So I'm not going to demo it because this is going to be in my sister's bag. I'm making her a sandhill sling. There will be additional tutorials about that bag as I make it. But, so starting out, you need webbing, enough to make a strap. My strap is cut to be 65 inches because I like it to be adjustable where I can shorten it to where I need, and then I can make it extra long if I need to. So that's just the size I like. You can cut it however you want. You can measure yourself, do whatever you need. But you need webbing, one adjustable strap slider, 1 or 2 swivel clips, and then a 5-inch by 5-inch piece of fabric. Now that piece of fabric is going to get really small. It doesn't have to be exactly 5 inches by 5 inches. You can have it be a scrap. If it ends up being 4 inches or 4.5, that's okay. Just a little on the larger side will be a little easier to work with, at least the first time you do this. Other than that, optionally, you can also use a lighter. So I like to singe the edges of my webbing so it doesn't fray a bunch. If you're using 100% cotton webbing, you cannot do this step. If you try to singe it, you'll just light the webbing on fire. But if you're using a polyester or a poly blend, you can use the lighter. And then you are also going to need a sewing machine and your standard sewing kit. All right, so now that you've gathered all your supplies, let's go ahead and start sewing. First, we need to attach my piece of scrap fabric to one end of my webbing. Now I grabbed a piece of scrap, so I'm just making sure that it is in fact 5 inches by 5 inches. Roughly, that is what it measures to. I'm now going to match the webbing to one edge, raw edge to raw edge, right sides together. Once I know it's about in the center, I want to pin it in place so that way I can take it over to my sewing machine and sew it. We're going to sew across the webbing at 1/2 inch seam allowance, and we don't want to forget to backstitch at the start and stop of this seam and every seam going forward. This next step is optional. You can trim off any extra webbing and lightly burn or singe the edge of your webbing to melt the cut edge. Do not do this if you are using 100% cotton webbing. 100% cotton webbing will just catch on fire instead of melting together. This step is optional. The decorative strap end that we are creating in this tutorial is made to help prevent fraying. This is just something sometimes people like to do as well. This next step is where we are going to create an accordion fold. This can be really tricky to follow, so go slow and rewatch the video if you need to. First, we want to flip the fabric to the wrong side and fold the fabric square upwards at just below where you sewed. We're then going to fold the fabric square back down so it is just a little bit above the raw edge of your fabric. Here you can see that fold is just poking out a little bit above my raw edge. Then we want to fold it one more time. This time it will be just below the first fold you created. You want this fold to be slightly longer than the first one, so when you turn it all right side out, it covers your first seam better. So here you can see my 3 different folds, each of them slowly poking up. We are going to pin this in place so we can sew it. Again, if you need to rewatch the video, just jump back and rewatch it. I'm going to pin this in place now, and I'm going to take it to my sewing machine. I want to make sure it does not come unfolded while I'm sewing it. So do not skip the pinning step. Now that we are pinned in place, we are going to sew right next to the webbing through all of the folds of this accordion fold. We want to make sure to sew next to the webbing, not through it. So here you can see I lined up right next to the webbing, and we want to sew through everything. So I pulled it forward a little bit, and I'm actually going to just backstitch to make sure I catch everything without it getting messed up. So sew on either side of that webbing, backstitching at the start and stop there. We will take it off and then do the other side. Again, just lining up right next to the webbing, making sure that I'm not going to sew through the webbing, about 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 inch away, back stitching at the start and stop, and then we are all sewn and ready to trim and turn. To make sure the finished edges lay flat and have sharp corners, we need to remove any excess bulk from our seam allowance. So first, we're going to trim any excess off the top, being very careful not to cut through any folds. Now we want to trim any excess fabric off of the sides at an angle. We're going to do this by cutting it into a triangle of sorts. We're going to cut inwards from both the top and the bottom of each seam allowance, reducing even more bulk in our corners, so that way they have less seam allowance there. Be sure not to accidentally trim through your seam at any point while doing this either. Next, it's time to turn the whole piece right side out, just very carefully making sure not to rip any of your stitches. If you're using a canvas like I did, it might be a little difficult to get it to work through. You can use a chopstick or a point turner to help poke everything. You want to make sure to poke your corners out with, again, a chopstick or a point turner to make sure that those corners are nice and sharp and that your rectangle can lay as flat as possible. This is why we trimmed all of that extra seam allowance off, so that way we had way less bulk inside of it, so that way we weren't fighting it nearly as much as I had to turn this. Here you can see it is finally starting to poke out. That chopstick is really helping me get it to lay nice and flat. Be very careful not to accidentally poke all the way through and rip your seam and have to start over. Before we sew that small opening we just turned through closed, we actually want to thread this through the end of our adjustable strap slider. You're going to have to sew it down onto the strap slider anyway, so you might as well do this all as one. You want to poke it in one side and back out the other to wrap around that center bar, and then pull it through enough to give yourself clearance to sew it down without that hardware getting in the way. I'm just going to clip it in place so that way it doesn't slide out when I go to my machine. We are now going to sew around all 4 edges of the fabric square, making a box. For this step, I like to use my Bernina foot number 53. This is a non-stick straight stitch foot and one of my absolute favorite feet. It is extra narrow, making it ideal for a close seam allowance top stitch. If you do not have a Bernina, look to see what straight stitch feet your machine might have to offer instead that have this extra narrow edge to them. Now that my foot is on, we are going to go ahead and sew around all of the edges of my fabric square. Here you can see that narrow foot lets me get a little closer. It can be tricky to get all of that bulk underneath your presser foot. Sometimes starting on a different edge will make it easier, because I'm not trying to force all of the bulk right off the bat. Now we're going to start right on this edge, do a little straight stitch, back stitch, and then go to the corner, and then pivot, and continue sewing around all 4 edges of the fabric square. For each corner, just be sure to put the needle down before lifting your presser foot so you stay anchored into the corner whenever you lift it up so you don't slip off of track and lose where you're going. Now I did decide to put the X in this as a decorative reinforcement. So here I'm just doing a little X through one side, pivoting, going back across, and then pivoting again and going through the center again to just make an X, just reinforcing it. This is for my sister. I want to make sure it stays really secure for her. Now that we have this really cute decorative edge on our webbing, we are ready to thread the rest of the webbing through a swivel clip to create a strap. Now you want to be careful not to twist the webbing while you do this. You're just going to thread the other end through a swivel clip, making sure it lies nice and flat there. and then thread it again through the strap slider in one side and back out the other side. Always double check that you did not twist. Everything's laying nice and flat. Thread it through again, and now you have an adjustable strap slider on your strap. If you are making this a fully removable strap, you would then repeat the entire process of making a decorative strap end on this other raw edge of your webbing. Instead of feeding the edge through another strap slider, you would then thread it through another swivel clip before sewing the strap end down. Otherwise, it's the exact same process, just with a different piece of hardware. And that's it! You did it! So, now you have put at least one decorative edge on an adjustable strap slider. If you want, you can go ahead and do the other edge to make it a fully removable strap, but again, that's all up to you. I am going to go ahead and take this and put it into the part of my sandhill sling and start working on other videos that show how to do different fun parts of that project. In the meantime, I hope this was really helpful. If you have any questions or if anything wasn't totally clear, please feel free to comment them down below. I am totally happy to help. If you have tutorial requests or something you would like me to show you how to make, also feel free to drop that down below. I am happy to help in any way I can. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. Don't forget to check out the blog if you want to look at the written tutorial. I have some older tutorials there as well. Follow me on all social media. I am Summer Sapphires everywhere across the board. And yeah, that's gonna be it. If you liked it, give a like, subscribe to the channel. I have a project share video I am working on next. So I made myself something and I'm just sharing the process with you. And then I have some other tutorials and some other tips and tricks videos coming soon. And yeah, I have a whole list of things that I am working on. So please like, comment, subscribe, tune in for more. And that's going to be it. So in the meantime, pleasant seams, everybody.